Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 175. Chapter 175. Before the beginning of the campaign, Rostov had received a letter from his parents in which they told him briefly of Natasha's illness and the breaking off of her engagement to Prince Andrew, which they explained by Natasha's having rejected him, and again asked Nicholas to retire from the army and return home. On receiving this letter, Nicholas did not even make any attempt to get to leave of absence or to retire from the army, but wrote to his parents that he was sorry Natasha was ill and her engagement broken off, and that he would do all he could to meet their wishes. To Sonia, he wrote separately. "Adored friend of my soul," he wrote, "nothing but honor could keep me from returning to the country. But now, at the commencement of the campaign, I should feel dishonored, not only in my comrades' eyes, but in my own, if I preferred my own happiness to my love and duty to the fatherland. But this shall be our last separation. Believe me, directly after the war is over, if I am still alive and still loved by you, I will throw up everything and fly to you, to press you forever to my ardent breasts." It was, in fact, only the commencement of the campaign that prevented Rostov from returning home as he had promised and marrying Sonia. The autumn in Notre Dame, with the hunting, and the winter with the Christmas holidays and Sonia's love, had opened out to him a vista of tranquil rural joys and peace, such as he had never known before, and which now allured him. A splendid wife, children, a good pack of hounds, a dozen leashes of smart borzois, agriculture, neighbors, service by election, thought he. But now the campaign was beginning, and he had to remain with his regiment. And so it had to be so. Nicholas Rostov, as was natural to him, felt contented with the life he led in the regiment, and was able to find pleasure in that life. On his return from his furlough, Nicholas, having been joyfully welcomed by his comrades, was sent to obtain remounts, and brought back from the Ukraine excellent horses, which pleased him and earned him commendation from his commanders. During his absence he had been promoted captain, and when the regiment was put on war footing with an increase in numbers, he was again allotted his old squadron. The campaign began. The regiment was moved into Poland on double pay. New officers arrived, new men and horses, and above all, everybody was infected with the merrily excited mood that goes with the commencement of a war. And Rostov, conscious of his advantageous position in the regiment, devoted himself entirely to the pleasures and interests of military service, though he knew that sooner or later he would have to relinquish them. The troops retired from Vilna for various complicated reasons of state, political, and strategic. Each step of the retreat was accompanied by a complicated interest of arguments and passions at headquarters. For the Pavlograd Hussars, however, the whole of this retreat during the finest period of summer, and with sufficient supplies, was a very simple and agreeable business. It was only at headquarters that there was any depression, uneasiness, and intriguing. In the body of the army, they did not ask themselves where they were going or why. If they regretted having to retreat, it was only because they had to leave billets they had grown accustomed to, or some pretty young Polish lady. If the thought that things looked bad chanced to enter anyone's head, he tried to be as cheerful as befits a good soldier, not to think of the general trend of affairs, but only of the task nearest to hand. First they camped gaily before Vilna, making acquaintance with the Polish landowners, preparing for reviews, and being reviewed by the emperor and other high commanders. Then came an order to retreat to Sivanye, and destroy any provisions that they could not carry away with them. Svetsiany was remembered by the Hussars only as the drunken camp, a name the whole company gave to their encampment there, and because many complaints were made against the troops who, taking advantage of the order to collect provisions, took also horses, carriages, and carpets from the Polish proprietors. Rostov remembered Svetsiany because of the first day of their arrival in that small town. He changed his sergeant major and was unable to manage all the drunken men of his squadron who, unknown to him, had appropriated 5 barrels of old beer. From Svetsiany, they retired farther and further to Drisa, and thence again beyond Drisa, drawing near to the frontier of Russia proper. On the 13th of July, the Pavlograds took part in a serious action for the first time. On the 12th of July, on the eve of that action, there was a heavy storm of rain and hail. In general, the summer of 1812 was remarkable for its storms. 2 Pavlograd squadrons were bivouacking on a field of rye, which was already in ear, but had been completely trodden down by cattle and horses. The rain was descending in torrents, and Rostov, with a young officer named Ilyin, his protégé, was sitting in a hastily constructed shelter. An officer of the regiment, with long mustaches extending into his cheeks, who after riding to the staff had been overtaken by the rain, entered Rostov's shelter. "I have come from the staff, Count. Have you heard of Ryskilov's exploit?" And the officer gave them details of Sultanov's battle, which he had heard from the staff. Rostov, smoking his pipe and turning his head about as the water trickled down his neck, listened attentively, and an occasional glance at Ilyin, who was pressing close to him. This officer, a lad of 16 who had recently joined the regiment, was now in the same relation to Nicholas that Nicholas had been to Denisov 7 years before. Ilyin tried to imitate Rostov in everything, and adored him as a girl might have done. Zhirinsky, the officer with the long mustache, spoke grandiloquently of the Saltanov Dam being a Russian Thermopylae, and of how a deed worthy of antiquity had been performed by General Revsky. He recounted how Revsky had led his 2 sons onto the dam under terrific fire, and had charged with them beside him. Rostov heard the story, and not only said nothing to encourage Zhirinsky's enthusiasm, but on the contrary, looked like a man ashamed of what he was hearing, though with no intention of contradicting it. Since the campaigns of Austerlitz and of 1807, Rostov knew by experience that men always lie when describing military exploits, as he himself had done when recounting them. Besides that, he had experienced enough to know that nothing happens in war at all, as we imagine or relate it. And so he did not like Zhirinsky's tale, nor did he like Zhirinsky himself, who with his mustaches extending over his cheeks, bent low over the face of his hearer, as was his habit, and crowded Rostov in the narrow shanty. Rostov looked at him in silence. In the first place, there must have been such a confusion and crowding of the dam that was being attacked, that if Revsky did lead his sons there, it could not have no effect except perhaps on some dozen men nearest to him, thought he. The rest could not even see how or with whom Revsky had come to the dam, and even those who did see it would not have much been stimulated by it, for what had they to do with Revsky's tender paternal feelings when their own skins were in danger? And besides, the fate of the fatherland did not depend on whether they took the Saltanov Dam or not, as we are told at the case of Thermopylae. So why should he have made such a sacrifice? Why expose his own children in the battle? I would not have taken my brother Petya there, or even Ilyin, who's a stranger to me, but a nice lad, but would have tried to put them somewhere under cover. Nicholas continued to think, as he listened to Zhirinsky. But he did not express his thoughts, for in such matters, too, he had gained experience. He knew that his tale redounded to the glory of our arms, and so one had to pretend not to doubt it, and he acted accordingly. "I cannot stand this any more," said Ilyin, noticing that Rostov did not relish Zhirinsky's conversation. "My stockings and shirt, and the water is running on my seat. I'll go and look for shelter. The rain seems less heavy." Ilyin went out, and Zhirinsky rode away. 5 minutes later, Ilyin, splashing through the mud, came running back to the shanty. "Hurrah, Rostov, come quick, I found it. About 200 yards away, there's a tavern, where ours have already gathered. We can at least get dry there, and Mary Hendrikhovna is there." Maria Hendrikhovna was the wife of the regiment doctor, a pretty young German woman he had married in Poland. The doctor, whether from lack of means or because he did not like to part from his young wife in the early days of their marriage, took her about with him wherever the Hussar regiment went, and his jealousy had become a standing joke among Hussar officers. Rostov threw his cloak over his shoulders, shouted to Lavzhuka to follow with the things, now slipping in the mud, now splashing right through it, set off with Ilion in the lessening rain and the darkness that was occasionally rent by distant lightning. "Rostov, where are you?" "Here, what lightning?" they called to one another. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 175. I hope you enjoyed it. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 175. He had gained experience. Changes are afoot for our old friend Nicholas Rostov. It's been a while since we last met with him, and today he seems a bit different. Previously, he's been angry, quick-tempered, and irascible. Not so today. Today he's agreeable and easygoing. Late in the chapter, as he listens to a speech by a fellow soldier he disagrees with, we're offered a possible explanation for why he seems so well-adjusted now. The reason is that recently in his life, quote, he had gained experience, end quote. What has this experience taught him? The answer to this question is hinted at throughout the chapter. It's never made explicit, but it seems like Nicholas has become more cautious about battling against the natural flow of events. Before, you'll recall, he'll get apoplectic over his father's playful jesting or, say, the theft of a friend's wallet. Today, however, in response to an adverse situation, hear the letter his family writes him imploring him to return home, he doesn't get upset. He recognizes that his natural duty as a soldier is to remain with his regiment, so he calmly writes back to his family that he will not be returning home. This living with acceptance is reflected and contrasted with the experience of his fellow soldiers in the officer class, respectively. For the officer class, the retreat from Vilna is accompanied by a complicated interplay of interest, arguments, and passions. For the Pavlograd Hussars, however, it was very simple and agreeable business. This discrepancy of experience of the same event is due to how the two groups approach the problem. The officer class is worried about something they have no control over, the future and the enemy's response. The Hussars, on the other hand, merely follow orders and don't allow themselves to think too far ahead, preferring instead to focus on the tasks at hand. As the story moves forward, pay close attention to Nicholas Rostov's character. Try to note when he does and does not apply the lessons he has learned from experience. Daily meditation. If you wish to maintain a will conformable to nature, you have every security, every faculty. You have no troubles. For if you wish to maintain what is in your own power and is naturally free, and if you are content with these, what else do you care for? For who is the master of such things? Who can take them away? If you choose to be modest and faithful, who shall not allow you to be so? If you choose not to be restrained or compelled, who shall compel you to desire what you think you ought not to desire? Who shall compel you to avoid what you do not think fit to avoid? But what do you say? The judge will determine against you something that appears formidable, but that you should also suffer in trying to avoid it? How can he do that? When then the pursuit of objects and the avoiding of them are in your power, what else do you care for? Let this be your preface, this your narrative, this your confirmation, this your victory, this your peroration, this your applause. Epictetus, The Discourses. That concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 175 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening with me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 176. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.